Welcome to Lowell Walks. My name is Richard Howe. I'll be your tour guide on today's virtual walk. Our destination today is Lowell Memorial Auditorium. This is Lowell Memorial Auditorium on East Merrimack Street in Lowell, Massachusetts. The building came about after World War I. The state legislature in Chapter 148 of the Special Acts of 1919 passed this legislation which allowed for the creation of a commission to construct a public building in the city of Lowell in memory of soldiers and sailors. The commission was authorized to borrow up to $1 million, and the plans called for a public hall of 4,000 seats with a second hall of 675 seats, and then a number of offices that would be used by local veterans organizations. The cornerstone of the auditorium was laid on September 25th, 1920, and the building itself was dedicated on September 21st, 1922. Vice President Calvin Coolidge presided at the ceremony. He had been the governor of Massachusetts who signed the legislation back in 1919 that created the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. Now, the building itself on its front facade says, "Dedicated to the men and women of Lowell who were in the service of the country in the wars in which the United States has been engaged. Tribute of a grateful city." The building is of interesting architecture. The big central hall is round, which provides very good acoustics. I was actually at a performance by Bruce Springsteen inside the auditorium, and he paused in the middle of a set, looked around at the walls and said, "What a great round building this is." And this is a picture of the inside at a Veterans Day ceremony. Now this is the second hall. It was originally called Liberty Hall, as you can see from the ribbon that's around the top facade. But this is now used as the Merrimack Repertory Theater. When this was first constructed, it was configured to fit 675 people. The MRT, in a very nice renovation in fairly recent years, has provided more comfortable and spacious seating, so the capacity is fewer than that. And the decoration in the exterior of the building in the band around the top lists a number of famous battles. Here we can see Fair Oaks, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, for Civil War battles. But then there's also the names of famous military commanders. In the rear portion of the building, there's a veterans wing that has a number of offices that are for the use of veterans organizations. And their names are inscribed at the top of the building. It says Grand Army of the Republic, American Legion, Veterans of Spanish War. Those are the three main veterans organizations that were in operation in 1920-21 when the building was constructed. What I find interesting about this facade of the building are the names that are inscribed on it. In the center upper portion, it says American Red Cross and Women's Relief Corps. Then across the bottom, across the first layer of windows and doors, it says Clara Barton, who was a nurse in the Civil War. To the right, it says Molly Pitcher, who fought in the American side of the American Revolution. And then Hannah Dustin, who was from Haverhill, Massachusetts, and she had an encounter with the Native Americans back in the 17th century. We're going to start our tour on the exterior grounds of the auditorium, where there are a number of monuments. And the first one is in the foreground of this picture. It's a cannon. Here's an older picture of it. It's actually a German cannon. It was made by the Krupp Iron Works in Germany in 1917. It's a 210 millimeter howitzer, and that means that the opening of the barrel is 210 millimeters, or about 8 inches. It was one of the primary German artillery pieces in World War I, and it and approximately 1,000 like it were captured by the American Army at the end of the war, and they were shipped back to the United States. Well, culturally, at the end of World War I, we still put high value on what were called trophies of war. For probably an age-old practice in warfare is that if you're victorious, you bring back things that you've captured from the enemy. Now, originally that took the form of swords and shields, but by World War II, they were actually bringing back large cannons, and this thing weighs 4 tons, 8,000 pounds. And so it's a monument to the American victory in World War I. That's what it looks like now. Unfortunately, the elements have caused it to rust, and it's really in need of repair. The Greater Lowell Veterans Council is trying to find a way to renovate it and restore it. As I said, there were maybe at least 1,000 of these brought back to the United States, but when World War II began, the majority of these older cannons were all melted down for scrap metal. And so this is one of the few that remain in the United States. And so it's definitely worth saving. The next most recent monument installed on the grounds is this one. It's a Spanish-American War monument, and it was installed in 1958. It was the artist who sculpted it was now named Melzar Mossman. He was from Chicopee, Massachusetts. He did the sculpture early in the 1900s, but this piece wasn't formed until 1958, and it was made by the McCann Bronze Company of Somerville, Massachusetts. It's not a unique statue. There are probably half a dozen to a dozen of this identical statue in cities around Massachusetts. Now, in the Spanish-American War, which is 1898, about 250 men from Lowell served, and about 30 of them died. All of them died from disease. None of them died from wounds in battle. But if you're only 21 in 1898, you still lived up into the 1950s. So Spanish-American War survivors were with us into the 1960s. The next most recent monument was the Korean War Memorial. That was installed in 1985. And approximately 7,000 men from Lowell served during the Korean War, and 17 from Lowell died during that conflict. And that was 1985. The following year, 1986, a Vietnam memorial was installed. It's a 6-sided granite memorial. On one side, as you can see in this picture, is American flag and the silhouette of Vietnam. It says, "In memory of all brave men and women from Lowell who served and all those who gave their lives in Vietnam." And then each of the other sides is a branch of the armed services. You can see the Marines listed. There were 7 Marines who died. And on the other side, there's the Navy, the Air Force, which no one died from Lowell in those branches. And then the Army is on the other side. And there were 14 men from Lowell who died while serving in the Army. The next year, 1987, the World War II monument was installed. Now, thousands served during that war, and 377 died in the conflict. A more recent one came in 1993. This is dedicated to all the men and women, Marines and Navy corpsmen who have served with pride and honor in the U.S. Marine Corps. This was originally installed outside J.J. Turner's Pub, which is at the corner of Central Street and near Middlesex Street. But when that ceased being J.J. Turner's Pub, it was relocated to the grounds of the auditorium. This is a monument to women who have served in the military. That was installed in 1997. And this is the POW MIA monument that's also on the grounds of the auditorium. The walkway leading up to the front steps of the auditorium is named for Bradford Brad Morse, who represented Lowell in the United States Congress in the 1960s. He served for a number of years. In 1972, he was appointed by President Nixon to be the #2 representative of America at the United Nations. Brad Morse was a Navy veteran of World War II. He also was the member of Congress who started the movement to bring Lowell National Historic Park to Lowell. The bridge that goes over the Concord River just to the front of the Lowell Memorial Auditorium in 1993 was dedicated to all those who served at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Now, this bridge is the location of a water ceremony that's conducted every year, both at Memorial Day and at Pearl Harbor Day. And in the water ceremony, it's meant to honor those who lost their lives at sea. Because they have no final resting place on land, people cannot go and decorate their graves or pay their respect. And so the practice of the water ceremony is to play taps on the bugle, fire a salute with rifles, and then people cast flowers into the water in memory of those who have died at sea. Well, now we move inside the Lowell Memorial Auditorium to probably the most historically packed portion of the building, and that's called the Hall of Flags. It's really a big entry foyer. Originally, it was called Trophy Hall, and the intent was to display captured artifacts or the so-called trophies of war in this space. But as we've seen, the trophies of war by 1918 were quite large, and it wasn't practical to put them into this room. And so it was renamed the Hall of Flags. And it came to memorialize those who have given their lives during the different wars who were from Lowell. There are a number of tablets installed, and one for most of the different conflicts. In 1924, there were 4 tablets installed. The first is pictured here, and this was to all of those from Lowell or from this area who in earlier conflicts, namely the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and the Mexican War, who gave their lives in service of this country. On that same day in 1924, which also installed were 2 tablets for the Civil War, and there were 648 names on those tablets. That's how many men from Lowell died during the war. There was a Spanish-American War tablet with the name of 32, and there was a World War I tablet with 146 names on it. I think there's 2 World War I tablets with a total of 146. After World War II, in 1947 on Memorial Day, 4 tablets, which contained all of the names of those who died in World War II, they were installed. So you have the World War II tablet with 436 names. You have a Korean War tablet with 17, Vietnam with 21, and a tablet for the Gulf War in the 1990s was 1 name. And there's actually one man from Lowell named John Landry who died in 2007 during Operation Iraqi Freedom. And the Great Lowell Veterans Council is working with the trustees of the Lowell Memorial Auditorium to get a tablet or a plaque to honor his sacrifice. Now, besides the tablets to those who died in battle, there's another one that's centered upon the entry doors into the main auditorium that lists those from Lowell who have been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Those include 3 from the Civil War: Adelbert Ames, Joseph Swett, Eugene Ferris. One, James Sullivan, who was awarded it for heroism in peacetime. He was serving on a Navy ship, and another sailor fell overboard, was drowning, and Sullivan jumped into the ocean and rescued him. George Charette was awarded the Medal of Honor while serving in the United States Navy during the Spanish-American War. Joseph Willett was awarded the medal posthumously for heroism in Korea in 1950. He died in action and was awarded the medal for his heroism. And then David McNerney, who was born in Lowell, lived here for a number of years, and then moved away with his family. He was awarded the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. And more recently, Ryan Pitts, a sergeant in the United States Army, was awarded the medal for heroism in Afghanistan. Pitts was born in Lowell, and since he moved to Nashua, New Hampshire, which is his residence. But like McNerney, since Pitts was born here, the Veterans Council feels it's appropriate to honor him with an addition to this plaque. Now, besides those plaques, we have a number of other unique artifacts. This is a bust of General Ben Butler. It was sculpted by an artist from Manchester, New Hampshire named Lucien Gosselin, and it was paid for by the Grand Army of the Republic, the Veterans Organization of Union Civil War Veterans, and it was given to the auditorium in 1930. There's a large portrait of General George S. Patton, the World War II hero. This was painted by another artist from Manchester, New Hampshire, a man named Oscar Durand. It was installed in May, Memorial Day, 1971. And there at the unveiling was General Patton's daughter, named Ruth Patton Totten. It was helped financed by the Military Order of the Purple Heart, which is a nationwide organization of people who have served in the military who have been awarded the Purple Heart, which is awarded to those who are wounded or killed in battle. And General Patton was a recipient of that. He received it for service during World War I. Now, there's a connection between General Patton and the city of Lowell. In 1911, Patton married a young woman named Beatrice Ayer, who was from Lowell. Her father's name was Frederick Ayer. He was the brother of James Ayer. Together they formed the Ayer Patent Medicine Company. And Frederick Ayer and his daughter Beatrice lived at the corner of School Street and Pawtucket Street in the place that we have come to know as the Franco-American School. So as you walk into the foyer of the auditorium and you look to your left and you see the portrait of George S. Patton, you know that it's there purposely because of Patton's connection with the city of Lowell. Joseph Willett, who I've mentioned previously, was awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroism in Korea. When 2007, his family donated the medal to the Greater Lowell Veterans Council, who commissioned this frame as a picture of Willett. On the left, to the left of the picture, is the seal of the city of Lowell with the motto, "Art is the handmaid of human good." And to the right of Willett's picture is the shoulder patch of the 2nd Infantry Division, which is the unit that Willett served in. And then the medal is in the brass frame underneath it. This is a painting of Edith Norse Rogers, who represented Lowell in Congress from 1925 up until her death in 1960, which she was succeeded by Brad Morse, who I've talked about earlier. Rogers actually was married to John Jacob Rogers, who represented this era in Congress from 1913 until his untimely death in 1925. His wife Edith succeeded him. She really devoted her service in Congress to improving the plight of veterans, particularly after World War II. For example, the Veterans Hospital in Bedford, Massachusetts is named for her. And she accomplished much else, but that's, I think, the primary reason she's pictured here. And her portrait is done by local artist Janet Lambert Moore. This is a display that honors those who were prisoners of war or who are missing in action. It was on the occasion of the U.S. Post Office rolling out this stamp in 1995 in memory of POWs and MIAs. And underneath the blown up image of the stamp is a display that honors two men from Lowell who were POWs in World War II. One named Kenneth Regan was captured by the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge. Regan survived the war and he lived until 1995. The other, Joseph Voyer, was captured by the Japanese in the Philippines at the start of the war. He survived the famous Bataan Death March, and he survived the war, and he lived until 1985. This is the chair of honor for POWs and MIAs. It's actually inside the main hall of the auditorium, and it's to remind everybody that there are those who served who either they haven't returned or their bodies have never been found. And then this artifact is a Civil War battle flag. It was the American flag captured by the 2nd Massachusetts Cavalry Company. It was an independent cavalry company, and it was commanded by a young man from Lowell named Solon Perkins. It was Perkins was killed in action in 1862 while fighting in Louisiana with the Cavalry Company. They were operating out of New Orleans, which had been captured by Lowell General Ben Butler. Perkins was known for his heroism and his coolness in action, and his men so admired him that after the war they presented this flag to his mother when they returned to Lowell. She gave it to a relative who had this ornate wooden flag frame commissioned, and it long hung in the auditorium, and it was taken down and it was put in storage in the basement. It was largely forgotten until just recently. Some of the employees of the auditorium discovered it, and the Greater Lowell Veterans Council financed the restoration of the flag and the frame, and it was returned to the place where it had hung for many years in the auditorium. And so now we have the Hall of Flags. We can quickly go through the flags that are hanging from the ceiling. From left to right, the first one, these are a number of Revolutionary War era flags. The first one is called the Bucks of America. It was actually a Revolutionary War company of volunteer soldiers, all African American, who were all from Boston. The second one is called the First Navy Jack. A Navy Jack is the flag that flies from the small flagstaff at the bow of a Navy ship. Historically, this one has a snake and a "Don't Tread on Me" inscribed on it. Historically, those weren't part of this, but they were acquired later. Next is an American flag that has 20 stars on it. Next comes the flag that the American forces used at the Battle of Bunker Hill. It's got a green pine tree on it. That was a symbol of New England. The red and white flag with the lions on it is the flag thought to have been carried by Christopher Columbus. It's a Spanish flag. The green one is a Revolutionary War flag that was for the Independent Company of Newburyport. Next, the blue flag with the half moon was the Moultrie flag, also known as the Liberty flag. This was the flag commissioned by Colonel William Moultrie. He flew it over the fort at the entrance to the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, which was an important American victory over the British in 1776. The red and white striped flag with the small British emblem in it is called the Grand Union flag. This was flown by George Washington during the siege of Boston in 1775 and 1776, before the Stars and Stripes were developed. Next comes a more familiar flag of Great Britain, the Union Jack, for many years up until the Revolutionary War, that was the flag flown over the colonies. The white flag in gold with gold lettering is for Gold Star mothers. Those are mothers whose sons or daughters were killed in battle. Next, we have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts flag, and the blue flag with the yellow gold lettering is Gold Star wives. Those are women whose spouses were killed in battle. Next one, the blue with the red cross, is a variant of the New England flag. There's a yellow thing at the top. It's called an armillary sphere, and it's an astronomical device. And there's really no record of this flag being used in real life, but it became an artifact created after the Revolutionary War. The yellow flag is much more familiar, the yellow background with the coiled rattlesnake and the "don't tread on me" language. That was designed by Christopher Gadsden of South Carolina, and it was flown over some of the early ships used in the Continental Navy. The blue flag with the red cross and the small green pine tree is another variant of the Bunker Hill flag. The green flag is the emblem of the 1st Pennsylvania Militia Regiment. That's a famous Revolutionary War battle flag with a green background. And the red box shows a hunter with a spear thrusting it at a charging lion. The next is the Star-Spangled Banner flag. That was the one that flew over Fort McHenry during the War of 1812 when Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. And what's interesting about this flag is that when 2 new states had been added to the original 13, Vermont and Kentucky, they added additional stripes to the flag. So this one has a total of 15 stripes along with 15 stars. Well, they decided as they kept adding new states, they couldn't keep adding stripes, so they reverted back to just the 13 stripes. The maroon flag is that of the Bedford Minutemen who fought at Lexington and Concord in 1775. And the final one is the Bennington flag, and this was flown by American forces at the Battle of Bennington. On the interior wall are the flags of the various organizations that make up the Greater Lowell Veterans Council. I'll go through them quickly. You have the Greek American Legion, the Jewish American War Veterans, the Edith Norris Rogers chapter of the Disabled American Veterans. The white flag with the orange circle is the Merrimack Valley Vietnam Veterans. The royal blue flag is the American Legion, Lowell Post number 87. Then the Polish American Veterans of Lowell, the Armenian American Veterans of Lowell, and the Retired Armed Services Lowell chapter. Then we have the Consolidated Lowell Veterans Council flag, the Korean War Veterans, the AMVETS, that's the blue flag with the gold symbol in the center. American Veterans, that was a large organization in other parts of the country, and there are still some branches here. You have the Veterans of St. Louis Parish, the Portuguese American Veterans, post number 4 of the Franco-American War Veterans. The white flag is Veterans of World War I. Then you have post 862 of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Walker Rogers post that's on Plain Street. The white flag is the John J. Fennell Garrison of the Army-Navy Union. Then you have the Marine Corps League Lowell Detachment. That's the red flag with the Marine emblem in the center. The white flag is the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Red is the Patton Memorial Society. Then you have the Pearl Harbor Survivors. The 1st Battalion, 182nd Infantry is a National Guard unit from Lowell that fought in the South Pacific. And finally, you have the Molly Varnum chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Well, that concludes our tour of the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. The auditorium in the many years of its existence has seen some tremendous acts. My mother on December 7th, 1941 saw the Trapp Family Singers perform there. In the 1970s, I've seen Bob Hope, the comedian, perform, and more recently Bruce Springsteen. So we'll do another tour covering the acts that have taken place inside the auditorium. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Lowell Walks. I'm Richard Howe, and please check back for future virtual walks.